Good evening, everyone. My name is Rob Metz. I'm the Superintendent of Schools in St. Louis Park, and I'm going to present the 2016-17 World's Best Workforce Plan presentation, which is actually a look back at last year, the 2015-16 school year. So I'll start out with what is the World's Best Workforce Plan. And in my mind, the World's Best Workforce Plan is first of all, it comes from the Minnesota Legislature and the Minnesota Department of Education. But it's an overall plan to make sure that Minnesota public schools are producing students that are ready to perform in the workplace of tomorrow. In our case, we try very hard to align the work of the World's Best Workforce Plan to our own strategic plan. Our strategic plan is aligned to our school improvement plans because each individual school has their own school improvement plan. And our school improvement plans are aligned to our individual employee goals and evaluations. Each individual teacher has a personal development plan, and it all lines up. And so you're seeing in another slide coming soon the importance of having this work aligned. All of it, in our case, is geared to closing the achievement gap, and specifically closing the racial achievement gap. And I'm going to speak more about that on the next slide. There really are at least 3 reasons, and probably more, why closing the achievement gap is so important in Minnesota and in the United States, and especially here in St. Louis Park. First of all, for the individual student. For the individual student, it is really of life-changing importance that every student is ready for the future. When I narrow it down to the smallest denominator, we could speak about 1 grade level, 3rd grade, and whether a student can read proficiently by the end of 3rd grade. There's a lot of evidence that shows that students that read proficiently by the end of 3rd grade are more than likely going to go on and graduate from high school in 4 years. More than likely they're going to go on to some kind of a post-secondary school, and more than likely they're going to do well. And in my days of being an elementary principal, I would look at those numbers of the number of students who were reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade, and I took that very, very seriously. Because I also knew that the opposite was true, that students who weren't reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade were going to have an uphill climb all the way through the rest of their schooling. I looked at it even in terms of beyond that individual student, but and thought of it in terms of the family tree. Because if a student reads well in 3rd grade and passes through their schooling and graduates on time and goes to post-secondary school, then there's a very good chance that their children someday will do the same. The opposite is also true, that if they can't read proficiently by the end of 3rd grade and they maybe don't graduate from high school or don't get a post-secondary education of some kind, it's also likely that their children may not. So very, very important to the individual student. And even beyond the grades in school and the success in school, our goal here in St. Louis Park is that every individual student walks in the door of school every day, whether they're 3 years old or 18 years old, and they feel completely, fully themselves. They don't have to pretend. They don't feel like they're visiting someone else's school. They feel totally free and completely at home to be their full individual self. And so for individual students, their success in school is obvious. It's also important for our school district. We're in a very competitive school environment. I was at a Rotary meeting today sitting by a fellow whose children go to private school, and we had a great conversation about the choices available for schooling within a 20-mile radius of the city of St. Louis Park. It's an extremely competitive school environment, and for this district to be successful in the future, we have to be able to successfully educate all students, and especially students who are not as successful today, which in our case are our Black, Brown, and Native students. We need to be successful with every single student, and we are dedicated to making that happen. And then the city, state, and national economy. I had a meeting a few years ago with people from the Citizens League. They went through with myself and the city manager of St. Louis Park the demographics of the Twin Cities area 20 years into the future, the number of jobs, the number of people there will be. There literally won't be enough people in the metro area to fill every job that's going to be necessary in the next 20 years, and especially highly skilled jobs. So we cannot waste one single person. Every single person that comes through this school system has to be ready to contribute and take an important job in the metro area in the future. So what is my role as superintendent? Well, I've identified at least three. First of all, I need to provide the vision, both inside the school district and throughout the community. I have an opportunity to go to a lot of places around the community. Today, I was at Rotary. I was also at a Children First executive meeting. Came in contact with lots of community members. That happens frequently with me. I enjoy that. I love being able to go out in the community and tell people about the school district and share our mission. So both inside and outside of the district. I also try to make sure that all of our work is aligned, aligning the work across the elementary schools and between the elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school. I want the work we're doing to be systemic and systematic. So it can very easily slip away from you, and pretty soon one elementary school is operating differently than another, or the elementary work isn't aligned with the middle school, or the middle school is not aligned with the high school. We've made a lot of progress over the last 3 years, aligning the work between all of our schools across our district, up and down, vertically and horizontally, and that's important. I also need to align the budgets with the goals. I move the budgets around a lot. In the last few years, I've shifted money to fund things that I think are part of our mission. And then finally, to create and sustain an organization that bundles best practice technical fixes with racial, equitable, adaptable changes. So we use the word bundling a lot. I use it a lot because it describes something I think pretty unique in St. Louis Park. I'll use kindergarten as an example. When we were going to remodel kindergarten, previously we had 16 kindergarten teachers. Each teacher was doing their very best, but they were really working as independent contractors. They were trying hard, doing what they thought was best, but we weren't systemic and we weren't systematic. We pulled the kindergarten teachers together, created a task force, did all the research on what are the best practices in all-day kindergarten today. We visited the most effective kindergartens in Minnesota. We listened to teachers at the University of Minnesota, for example, and together we created a brand new model of what all-day kindergarten looks like in St. Louis Park. We trained the teachers, we coached the teachers so that they can implement this model successfully, and we bundled it with racial equity work. We're one of the only school districts in Minnesota that is really, truly isolating race and working hard to help each of our teachers understand their race and how their race impacts the learning of their students. There are lots of school districts that talk about cultural relevance and cultural competence, and that's important too, but we're one of the only ones that is really isolating race. And like most school districts in Minnesota, most of our teachers, principals, and superintendent are white, and many of our students are not. And we bring with us, I'm speaking for myself now as a white superintendent, our belief, our mindset, our baggage of many, many years of influence about race. And even though we might not recognize it, it's impacting many of the decisions we make. And so in St. Louis Park, we've invested in racial equity coaches where each of our teachers has a personal, private, confidential equity coach where they can examine their own racial background and their own racial identity and work to understand how that impacts the learning of their students. It's pretty unique, and our state representative, Peggy Flanagan, is helping us write a bill at this legislative session to see if the legislature will fund this project in St. Louis Park and actually help us study it. So we're bundling, best practice with racial equity work. The World's Workforce data includes these pieces, and then I'm just going to use the rest of this time to run through the data. This is required for us to report to the Minnesota Department of Education. How are our students entering kindergarten, leaving kindergarten? How well are they reading at third grade? Reading and math entering middle school, in other words, the end of fifth grade. Reading and math exiting the middle school, the end of eighth grade. Our high school graduation rate, and how are we doing in college career ready? How many of our students are college and career ready? We'll take them one at a time, and I'll start with kindergarten. So this was last year, 2015-16 kindergarten in St. Louis Park. This is based on the FAST literacy reading assessment. So when you look at this chart, if you're watching at home, think literacy or think reading. We assess our students with a FAST assessment 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. And these are the results. So the blue line is white students, the black line is all students, the orange line are black students, and the purple line are Hispanic students. We always break our data down by race so that we can see how well we are closing the achievement gap. And you can see where our students came in last fall. There's a big gap between those demographic groups, all the way from 74% coming in on track or at grade level for a kindergartner to 27% on track or at grade level for a kindergartner. You can see by mid-year that gap closed, and by the end of the year it closed significantly on the FAST literacy assessment. This is the second year in a row we've gotten data like this, and it's pretty exciting. So we know that all-day kindergarten helps us close the gap as early as possible, and that gives us a huge advantage. This fall, we also tested our kindergartners as they came in, and I decided to throw this in even though it's not required in the World's Best Workforce, but to show where students entered this year in kindergarten. I'll flip back a slide so you can compare. But this year, all students, 65% came in at grade level, black 45%, Hispanic 37%, and white 76%. If you flip back to last year, that's actually a little better than last year. Last year's 60% were on track. This year's 65% were on track. So this year's kindergartners on this one assessment came in a little bit ahead of where they came in last year. Third grade reading, if there are a couple of school board members in the audience here tonight, and they've heard me talk about this a lot, but the importance of reading proficiently by the end of third grade. This is based on the MCA test, the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments, and this is measuring the proficiency of third graders passing the MCA test in third grade. In this case, I just put up 3 different groups because I wanted to show the biggest gap, which is our challenge to close between white students, all students, and black students. And the goal is that these lines are going to get closer together over time with the gap narrowing, and that they will all rise. So can they all rise and the gap narrow? And you can see last year we made a little bit of progress. All students increased from 61% to 65. Black students jumped from 32% to 43%. So that was really exciting to see that shift last year in third grade. I look at other bits of data to see where this year's third graders are at. And when this year's third graders came in the fall of third grade, they were a tiny bit ahead of where last year's third graders were. So that's good news too. So there's a good opportunity for these lines to keep climbing next year. This is not required, but we also threw in third grade math just for fun. So you can see the last 5 years of third grade math. And again, our goal is that all lines will climb and that the gap will narrow. And the gap definitely narrowed last year in third grade. We try to look at it over a 5-year trend so that we can see patterns. And you can see this was actually very good news last year in third grade math. Then we jump to fifth grade. So first I'll show reading, then I'll show math. So leaving our elementary system, again, the blue line is white students, the black line is all students, and the orange line are black students. That's where the largest gaps have been, and that's where we're measuring our progress. And you can see 2015, they all dropped. 2016, they went back up again. And that again was good news. So we're hoping to see these lines keep climbing and the gaps keep narrowing. Fifth grade math. Not as successful, even though every single category went up, but the gap did not narrow in fifth grade math, and so we have work to do there. Then on to eighth grade. So when students leave the middle school and head into the high school, we're still using the MCA test, and this is reading. And math. So again, all lines going up, they're going the right direction. Still a big gap yet to close. Graduation rate from high school. This is probably this is the most amazing slide from this year's World's Best Workforce presentation, to show for the first time in a long time at St. Louis Park High School, all of our racial demographic groups, I believe I'm saying that correctly, scored above 90% on the four-year graduation rate in Minnesota. In this slide, it shows black graduation rate, four-year graduation rate at 91%, all at 93%, and white at 94%. And for perspective, the Minnesota graduation rate, four-year for black students and Hispanic students, is in the mid-60s. So this is quite an accomplishment to reach the 90% level. I think one of the secrets to this success is the ninth grade BAR program that really focuses on helping as many ninth graders as possible pass all of their ninth grade classes. Because it turns out that if you pass all of your ninth grade classes, the chances of you graduating in 4 years goes way up. And if you don't pass all of your ninth grade classes, then you are in trouble the whole way through, because you end up in 10th grade having to take all of your 10th grade classes and take over some ninth grade classes. And it can be a pretty overwhelming process. So if students pass all of their ninth grade classes, they are on the way to graduating in 4 years. St. Louis Park's developed a very unique approach that does not change the curriculum in ninth grade. It doesn't change the teachers. It doesn't change the administration. It focuses on building relationships among all those groups and then leveraging those relationships to apply pressure to help students complete the work that is necessary to pass classes. The one difference from all the other data I've showed you is everything else I've showed you, I would describe it as achievement data, math and reading scores. Passing classes is different. Passing classes is earning credits, and they're two different things. Typically, to earn credits, you need to complete work, and the work has to be completed at a certain level of proficiency. And most students who do not pass a high school class do so because they don't complete the work. They don't do something that they needed to do. So by building relationships and leveraging those relationships, more students can be caused to complete the work and earn the credits. And then a magical thing happens because that student is in 10th grade. They have all their credits, they have more confidence, they believe they're a learner, and they are much more likely to be successful in 10th grade. The last category that we are asked to present is college and career ready. There are a variety of ways of looking at this. This time I chose to look at longitudinal data off the Minnesota Department of Education website. on the percentage of students who are in college in the fall. And you can see in St. Louis Park in the fall of 2014, which is the last data that we have available, the most recent data we have available, 79% of St. Louis Park graduates were in a post-secondary school in the fall of 2014, compared to the state average of 69%. Usually we're a little above 80%, so this is down slightly. Usually we're around 82, 83% of our graduates are in a post-secondary school the fall after graduation. Then I broke it down to show you where they go. So about 20% are attending a Minnesota public four-year institution, about 21% a two-year public institution, about 20% a Minnesota private four-year school, about 2% a Minnesota private two-year school, and 38% are outside of Minnesota. And if you add that up, it comes out to 101%, and I double-checked it twice on the state website to make sure that was accurate, but that is accurate. I can tell you just from being around the high school the last few years, we have many more students staying home. If you look at the schools that are the most attended, they are the University of Minnesota and Normandale. And it didn't used to be that way. The University of Minnesota is getting many more of our most talented students, many more than they used to. And many more students are staying home, and I'm glad to see that. Two more slides. Other things to be proud of that don't show up on the World's Best Workforce presentation, but I think are important to share publicly. Last year, the Washington Post ranked St. Louis Park High School as the 4th highest rated high school in Minnesota. There are 3 prominent magazine rankings, the Washington Post, U.S. News and World Report, and Newsweek. And each use a different system to rate and rank their schools. And we do best by far in the Washington Post ranking because they look at one thing, the percentage of students who take college-level courses while they're in high school. So in our case, we are a rare high school that offers both advanced placement classes and international baccalaureate classes. I think our high school teachers deserve a lot of credit for being able to make this work. And in a high school of 1,400 students, we had over 1,200 students, 1,200 individual AP or IB courses completed last year. So what the Washington Post does is take that number of about 1,200, divide it by the number of seniors in your high school class, and they come up with a ratio. And when measured that way, St. Louis Park High School is one of the best in the state. Also, we made a lot of progress over the years in increasing the number of Black and Hispanic students who take AP, IB, or honors courses. 10 years ago, we had less than 10 students in this category. Last year, fall semester, we had 157 students who took over 330 AP, IB, or honors courses. And 46% of our Black and Hispanic seniors took at least one AP or IB class last year, which is a tremendous increase over the last 10 years. And then finally, what's coming next? A couple of things. First of all, we have a big referendum work in our future. I've been working with a community of residents, or a group of residents for over the last year, putting together some plans, initial plans for facility improvements in St. Louis Park. The school board's going to be taking a big chunk of time this winter, hearing from the community, from staff, and from students, what they think about these potential facility improvements. Sometime around spring break, our board will be making decisions about what to include in a referendum that will be coming up next fall, the fall of 2017. And then we always continue to build our brand. Our brand is our reputation. It's what people believe about us. It's our lifeblood. It's very important to me and to us. And earlier in this presentation, I talked about the competitive school environment that St. Louis Park sits in, probably the most competitive 10-mile square of public and private schools in Minnesota. And we're holding our own, and that's because we have a good brand, and we're actually growing. And it's important that we maintain that brand and that we continue to compete and continue to be successful in the public school world. So thank you for listening to this presentation. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the support that the community gives to St. Louis Park Public Schools. Thank you.